Good morning, everybody. Welcome to September POWTS Chat. I think most of you know me, Matt Jansen with the POWTS program here. So we've got a few things to go through. Um, some of the things that have crept up over the last month or two, and some information to share, and we'll get right into it. So some of you asked us, where were we? Last month we did not hold POWTS Chat. So what were we doing? Well, this is Travis and me playing in our dirt. So last month, Pouch Chat wasn't held. Well, for a couple reasons. Is one is we know that everybody gets busy in the summertime, including the staff, and so we had numerous staff were at Farm Technology Days, and with that staff load and other things going on with plan review and things, we thought it would be good to sort of skip one and allow us to get out in the field and not have to worry about doing Pouch Chat. Actually, Pouch Chat was supposed to take place, I think, actually during Farm Technology Days, so that was an additional issue for us. So, for any of you that came out there or haven't, Farm Technology Days rotates around the state. Interesting thing, not only all the farm technology stuff, but there is a really cool soil pit that we share with the USDA. Natural Resource Conservation Service folks and the Wisconsin Society of Professional Soil Scientists, and have some things for septic systems there. Travis was interviewed by the local radio station. We had Allison Dairyland come wandering through the pit to take a look at some soils. So, sort of an interesting place if you haven't been there. And for those of you that really want to know what the next soil exam, what the next monolith is going to be, this is a picture of it. So, hurry up and do a screenshot, snap that, and you can study it if anybody needs to take the next soil exam. So there you go. Um, Nope, too late. We're on to the next one. So anyway, mobile home connections. One of these questions came up. Who can connect a mobile home to a POWTS? So you're at a trailer park, manufactured home park. One trailer disappears, another trailer comes on. Who can make that service connection underneath there? It's a complicated answer. So if a building sewer is present, so they've got the pipe out, then master plumber restricted or master plumber can connect to it. If there is no building sewer, or journeyman can work on their own too. If there's no building sewer, then only a master plumber. So from what I've heard, a lot of these pre-manufactured homes are being shipped without any building sewer underneath them. They just basically have the plumbing goes through the bottom floor, and that's it, because they're not pre-plumbing them because they don't know which side of the building the sewer is going to go on or go out. So they don't know if they want to stub it out like this side by the door, if they want to stub it out the back side or stub it out the end. So they're just not. They're just leaving it. So if there is a building sewer underneath that trailer or that manufactured home, then the connection can be made by a restricted. But if there isn't, and you actually have to construct the building sewer, then it has to be done by a full master or a full plumber. So either or, depending on what it is under there. So we've had a question about some property lines. The department uses the term property line, so that's what's in our code, such as in table SPS 3D343-1 or setbacks. So this is different than a parcel or a lot line. I know that's a term that most of the counties are used to dealing with because of zoning rules that they have. You deal with a parcel or deal with a lot. But SPS 383 uses the term property line. So property is defined as a contiguous um, property to contiguous land under the same ownership. So I can own multiple lots or multiple parcels if it's all under my identical name. So Matt Jansen, not Matt Jansen and spouse. It has to be mine, the exact same ownership. That is considered the same property. So there's a little bit different in how those things are interpreted. So we have to be aware of that when we're applying these rules to POWTS as opposed to applying them for zoning or other kind of land divisions. So again, a parcel or a lot, is a division of your property. So this is one of these that we've come across. This person actually owns three different lots. So you can see the property is sort of the purple line around the outside, the dotted or dashed red lines are divisions of lots. But this one is actually more complex because even though there's three lots, it's actually under one tax parcel ID number. So it's been combined for tax purposes, but it's still listed as three lots under one parcel under one property. So it gets a little confusing. So they wanted to go onto the far left lot and build their system. Um, and the house actually straddles two lots, but it's one parcel. So the way we look at this is because the ownership is the same. This person, this husband and wife, they own all three lots, one parcel, one property. So coming out of their house and then crossing onto that far left lot, that is still considered their property. They don't need to do anything, um, that's not crossing a property line because it's still their property. So you can cross those if it's under the same ownership. There's no easements, or you don't have to force them to combine or whatever. Now, if that's something that you have on your planning rules or under zoning or something like that, that's a different story. We don't address that under POWTS, and it can't be a POWTS requirement, but you may have other rules or other codes in the county that may require something like that. So we all know why we're concerned about this is that, we look at, what are some of the dangers of crossing a property line? What happens if we go across it? So this is one that Katie had come up with. This is actually the new plan that came in. But if you look in the far lower left-hand corner, you'll see that there's an at grade, and you see area that has been removed, and you see remaining at grade. Well, this is one of those that straddled a property line, and it was found out that it was across the property line. And the owner of the other property came by and said, I'm removing your at grade off of my property. And they did that. And I don't know, Katie, if you want to pop in, how long was that system operating with only part of an at grade?
So the designer of the new system included a narrative with their plan, and I found it very amusing, and that's why I shared it with Matt. And they were unsure as to what year it that section of at grade was bulldozed or otherwise removed, but the previous owner or the gentleman who had done it is long dead. They had assumed sometime in the 90s. So I guess it's a testament to at grades how well they function if a third of
Yeah.
it can operate for 20 years.
Yeah. So so that's what happens. So, what happens if you do cross a property line? Um, it's theirs. I've seen instances where somebody had a 40-acre parcel and they had the old farm and they had a septic system and they decided to split off 38 acres and keep 2 acres for the house, not realizing that when they split that property, the mound was on the 38 acres of farmland that they sold off, and the new guy comes along and says, "Thanks for that mound system." Snip the force main, construct their house, and now they've got a free mound system. So, I mean, those are dangers of, either accidentally crossing a property line or, we talk about lot lines, even though it's their same property. If they own a 2 acre and a 38-acre parcel, what happens if they sell one off? And so I know from the county end, I mean, there's some concern there saying, hey, we should do something to make sure that that's correct. Well, you can warn people to say, hey, you should probably, record something or notify, if you're going to sell that property off or put something in there. But sometimes it doesn't happen, and then a subsequent owner, such as the owner's child or something, inherits those two parcels, not realizing the mound's on the other parcel, and then it gets sold off, and then there's an issue. So, you know, if a lot line is crossed, if they're not combining those, um, you know, there is an issue. There's an issue, of course, by accident crossing here. You put yourself at risk. So, this one here obviously was removed. They'd crossed it, found out they had crossed it, and it was removed. So, what are some things that we look at? I mean, well, one of the way to do it is an easement. So, an easement, it basically gives access to another parcel. And so how do we handle those? Well, we would like to say, if you own two, like the previous a couple slides ago, we looked at guy owns 3 lots, but it's one tax ID, say you should probably combine those. I mean, you can suggest it. We can't make it a requirement of issuing a sanitary permit or doing the plans. We can suggest it to them that said this is be for your benefit to do, but it's at their own detriment if they don't do that. Um, you know, we requiring an easement, we've been told well, years ago I was told from the attorney general opinion that we can't have an owner do an easement to theirself. It's strawman principle. It's like entering into a contract with yourself. You can't do an easement to yourself, but it'd probably be better to combine lots if they're not combined. But how do we handle easements? So this gets into the issue of when we see a property come through with an easement on it, how do we handle those? Well, each easement, can be different as an individual can be. So some just require access, others limit use. So some may just say, hey, I've got the right for 2 rods width along this 40 acres to access my other property. So what does that mean? It might be walking access, might be a road. So it depends on what that easement allows them to do. Others might limit use. It might be a conservancy easement. It might be an easement for stormwater discharge or stormwater collection. So we have to be aware that if we do see an easement, we sort of look at what those conditions are and how we treat them. So if you're doing the design or doing a plan review at the county level, and we should use our due diligence in making sure POWTS meet those conditions. We don't always know about them, and sometimes we find out afterwards um, that there was an easement or something. So if you are the person out in the field, do use your best, um, put your best foot forward and try to find out if there is an easement or what those conditions are. Make sure that we're meeting them. Sometimes it's just a power line easement they just want to run through. Others they say as part of the easement we don't want any construction underneath. That's a legal agreement between the owner and that entity. Um, you know, so we look at that, but it may not necessarily be something that we can hold as a restriction. Um, Also, an easement for placing a POWTS on another property does negate the need for a variance to that property line. So if I have an easement to cross that property line to put a mound or a property, for instance, let's say the one that we had back there with Katie, if they would have done an easement, said, "Hey, I'm getting an easement to straddle the property line or whatever," that we don't need to do a variance to that property line. The easement would take care of that for us. Had a
All
question
right.
come up about,
Hey,
yeah,
Matt, before we move away from easements, there are a couple of questions in the
sure,
chat. So I'm going to read them aloud to you and hopefully we can go through it a little bit. So,
sure.
first question being, so what if the system is overlapping parcel lines? Should a condition be added to the sanitary approval stating that if they sell the parcel, then an easement is required? Or would another condition be appropriate? I'd like to add to this question a little bit. What would
Yep.
be I guess, what would be the most appropriate thing for a county to do in this case? Would it be just to warn them
Well,
or,
that's basically what it falls down to. Is this is not a POUTS code. It's not a POUTS issue. It's a land division issue. So what I've advised the counties to do is I would have them strongly advise the homeowner that you could run into a situation that maybe not when you're around, but maybe 30 years down the road, like I said, your child inherits the property. They're not aware that, oh, that extra lot I'm going to sell off because in town I can sell it for X number of $1,000, make some money, not realizing that's where their septic system is, and then causing a problem down the road. So it'd be under their best interest to combine those or put something out there to say, hey, if I do sell that it should be combined, or then an easement should be, you know, done at that time. How that's exactly done, could be a myriad of different ways, but um, it's not a POUTS condition for us. It's a land division thing. And if they happen to sell off their parcel that has their septic system on it, that's their own detriment. So I guess an advisement or a caution to them to say, hey, you should do something to protect yourself down the road. That's up to them. I know some counties have had easements, you know, to themselves. I don't know if that's legal. I'm not a lawyer. I was told that that is not, but I know in some cases it has gone through. So that's something for you guys to talk with your corp counsel or maybe address through um, whatever kind of zoning or planning rules that you may have in your county. But it's not a POWTS thing that we can hold up to say you can't do this. It's not a POWTS rule. It's a land division rule or possibly a zoning issue.
Thank you. So on that same note, then I believe you answered it in your previous response, but there's another question in the chat. Why can't you create an easement to yourself for POWTS if you are intending to split the property and sell off the lot the existing POWTS is on?
Right. Well, the way it was explained to me is it's called the straw man principle. You can't, and an easement is basically entering into a contract with yourself. You can't do that legally. But then again, that may be something you want to talk to your corp counsel about, and if they feel that you can pursue that. I don't have a legal case number that I can point to say here's where the precedent is set. So that may be something you want to talk to your corp counsel. But the way I understand it, there's some legal challenges or problems with that of basically doing an easement to yourself. But
Thank you.
sure. So the next slide I have is conventional geometry. So everybody loves geometry, so that's why I put that word in there, just to get you going, get that adrenaline rush. Um, But the question we had is, can you feed a conventional system from both ends? And can you connect the ends? Because we've got some, I know there's a few installers out there that love to put these, the sort of the square donuts or rectangle systems out there where they connect the ends. Yeah, you can do that. And you can take the square footage for that little piece. So if this is a 3 foot wide cell and you've got that little piece connecting the two cells, that's a 3 by 3 square, you can add that square footage in and count that as part of your system. By all means, yeah, you can do that. So if you just want to feed from one end and connect them into sort of this loop, you can, all the square footage that's out there, you get credit for. Um, so I've also seen people connect the back end. Can you connect, like I said, do the loop and connect the end? Yeah, absolutely. Um, can you also feed a conventional from both ends? There's nothing in the code saying you can't. So we've had some instances where you may have, well, let's say you have two houses and they share one system. You could have one tank and um, a line come in from one side, and you can have a tank and a line come in from the other side. I've seen it where you have an accessory building that has its own separate tank feed in one side and the house feed in the other. So nothing saying you can't. It's sort of odd, but possibly the way stuff is laid out on your lot, systems in between. You don't want to pipe it all the way back to the house and then to come back halfway to where you just were. Um, in theory, you could do it this way. So it's not something we see a lot, but yes, you can. It is something that is code allowed. What about an at-grade recore? So we had this question come in. Can I rebuild an at-grade? Can I do like a recore like I do in a mound? Well, as an ISD, a submitter, you can propose basically anything. You have to show us that it meets the code. So even though it's not a component manual thing to do, you could do it as an ISD. So you can propose a wide range of things. The problems that we had with an at grade is that, in theory, yes, I can remove that material and rebuild it. But unlike a mound, the biomat forms in a mound typically between the aggregate on top and where that sand interface is, much farther above the natural soil. And so those are sort of easy to take out the sort of the guts of the mound, so to speak, that biomat, that contaminated gravel, replace your distribution network and cell, and then cover it back up again. The issue that we have with an at grade is that the biomat is that aggregate bed and the natural soil interface where those two connect. So removing that biomat, which is possibly in the gravel and into the natural native soil, is a problem because now we're scraping that natural soil. When we do that, obviously, if it's a ponded system, it's going to be wet. So they're very difficult. I mean, you could try to scrape some off and let them dry, but that's the difficulty in them is that the soils are usually wet. They don't want to dry out. Um, a lot of the at grades are in heavier textured soil. So trying not to smear that native soil and get it to dry out and not compact it, the risk is pretty high. But could you, in theory, do that? Yeah, we could attempt to do it. It's not the, especially on heavier textured soil, it's going to be difficult to do, but technically, yeah, you could attempt it. You could try it. So a lot of different things that are, a lot of moving parts here to see if it will work or not work. But in theory, yeah, you could actually recore an at grade. Next question we had that came up was talking about garage floor drains. So hopefully this guy, it looks like he's adding water just to sort of, you know, fill the trap. Hopefully is what he's doing, and it's not something exciting like, alcohol or something else, a solvent that he's dumping down his drain with that nice grin that he has. But the question is, where can, a garage floor drain discharge? So a residential floor drain. Um, is listed in table SPS 382.38-1. Lists the floor drains as discharging to, well, it's got a couple other ones that are combined sewer, but a sanitary sewer or a POWTS. So you can go down the sewer line with those. They may also be able to discharge to grade, but that's regulated by the DNR. So I know we've had various people over the years that have talked to the DNR and gotten exemption or got in writing from them that you can discharge to grade. Um, that is a touch and go. Some DNR people have said, okay, that's not a problem. Other DNR people, because of the potential for contamination of, whatever drippings off your vehicle, either oil or gasoline or something like that, that they say it's not a clear water discharge and has to be regulated through a permit. So depending on who you ask and when you ask, you may be able to get a piece of paper from the DNR saying that's okay. Um, Commercial floor drains are a different story. So if you've got a commercial garage, um, they're probably industrial wastewater and regulated by the DNR. So a lot more propensity for vehicles to be stored and having mechanics or somebody work on something like that. Um, the probability of having oil or antifreeze or something like that go down the drain is high, and those are most likely going to be industrial wastewater, and those can't go into a pouch because we're going to have a contamination source, hazardous materials going in there, but those could go to a holding tank. So if you have sanitary sewer that combines with it, you could do a combined one, or if it's a holding tank just for the floor drain, that'd be solely regulated through the DNR. So commercial, different than your residential floor drain. So we're talking about recores. Probably should have had the slide next to it, but the question is, what about mound recores? When is it a good option? So we've had some of these come through here. I want to do a mound recore. Well, we have to make sure that the failure is at that um, distribution cell sand interface. So that's what a recore is makes sense, is that just over the years it's just eventually biomass built up, it's plugged, mountain's 30 35 years old or whatever, and we can recore that material out, or core that material out, put a little bit of sand back down if we need it, add our distribution network again in the gravel, and put it back together. However, we've been running into some situations where it's not always up in that area. It's maybe a failure down at the sand soil interface. If it's a failure at the sand soil interface, that is not a situation that's good for a mound recore. We've got a problem with that native soil. So here's one where one of my coworkers they had looked at it, and you can see that the soil it's compacted at the surface. And even the soil down below is sort of clod-like. It's not very good structured. Something occurred, either the soil test missed the structure issue, or this sort of leads towards that there is possibly some issues during construction. Plowed when it was too wet, driven on and compacted while it was being constructed. Something happened during the construction phase, or there's a problem with the soil to start with. So even recoring it out on top isn't going to solve the problem down below. even if there is some biomat up top, if we have slow permeability or reduced permeability at that sand soil interface, that mound recore isn't going to help it. So we have to make sure that everything else is still good underneath that mound. So just because the mound's older and it's not working well, a mound recore isn't always the best option. May need to go to a different site or rehabilitate what's there. It's not going to fix an existing issue with the native soil. So we have to make sure that that's good also. Had a question come in. DSPS plan page for gravity dose pump tank is missing system demand, gallons per minute, and force main friction loss. Was that intentional? Um, well, we've had some good discussions, and so I put yes and no. At first, I had yes, and then we changed it to no, and now I put yes and no. So the issue with a dosed gravity is that once wastewater reaches the outlet or the highest, or could be the highest point, Katie had pointed out to me that we could be pumping uphill for a ways until it reaches the hill and then is no longer under pressure and then it's gravity flow. So, yeah, we should probably have it in there and probably, it's required as part of the component manual. We should probably put it in there. But most of the time, it's not going to make a difference. So in this case here, if if all the pump has to do is basically pump up 3 feet of lift, and then it's doing gravity flow after that, um, you know, every pump is gonna meet um, you know, that amount of gallons per minute. They're going to have plenty of lift to get it out there. Now, you want to be careful. I mean, obviously, in a situation like this, if you're just dosing a residential system, lifting it up and out, obviously you don't want to put a full horse or a horse and a half or a giant pump out there, because you're really going to be overdosing things like that. Also, it's pointed out that various product approvals out there for some of the other manufactured products, they don't want high pressure, like in a chamber system. We don't want a high dose, high pressure. We want to reduce that flow coming in there. We don't want to have something under high pressure. So, um, but calculating the system demand, if you look at all the pump curves, the pumps, if they're only lifting 3 feet ahead, we don't have to worry about how many gallons per minute it supplies because we're going to be well under that curve. Now, again, all systems aren't the same. So if we do have to lift up, whatever 20, 30 feet up a hill and then gravity flows down the other side, then maybe we have to start looking at things like that. Are we getting enough of a discharge? Now, gallons per minute, that's not as critical because it doesn't really matter how many gallons per minute we're running as long as it can get it up the hill. But then on the other hand, we don't want to be near the end of our curve. We don't want to be, if the pump can only lift it up there and is only running at 1 gallon per minute, we don't want that pump running an hour, trying to dose it. Like in this case, running 62 minutes to dose at 62 gallons. So you have to, adjust the pump, to make sure that we're not having a pump that's, pumping way too much. Um, but since there's no actual requirement for how many gallons per minute, there's no demand. The force main loss is going to sort of self-regulate. As long as you can push it up the hill, you may have to look at some force main loss possibly for that section that you're going up the hill. In a case like this, we're only going up 3 feet. Friction loss is going to be negligible. Um, so for the most part, it probably doesn't apply unless you're pumping up a very high lift. Um, that's where it's going to matter. But otherwise, if you're pumping downhill, even a long way, it's flowing under gravity, so there's really not a friction loss because it's flowing downhill under gravity. So I hope that makes some sense that most of the time it doesn't apply, but in a couple cases, if you're pumping up a large elevation difference, we should look at, you know, what's being discharged. Then make sure the pump can still meet its pump curve. So that brings us into total dynamic head and what are some of the calculations. So if we do have to do that, we've also had some questions about, again, calculating total dynamic head. We got some newer folks out there that, not always familiar with it. So I thought this would be a good time to go through some of those kind of things. So total dynamic head is made up of basically 4 different parts. It's made up of distal pressure. So whatever your pressure distribution network requires. We have some network losses. We calculate as 30% of distal pressure. Vertical lift, which is the pump off to the highest point, and then friction loss. As you have higher and higher velocity flow, you're going to have more and more friction against the walls of those pipe. It's going to be harder and harder to push. Also depends on the size of the pipe. So obviously, if I'm pushing at 40 gallons per minute through a 1 inch pipe, I'm going to have a lot of friction loss as opposed to 40 gallons per minute through a 6 inch pipe, for instance. So during plan review, make sure that you check the calculations and verify the pump can meet the demand at the total dynamic head. So that's why we have the pump curves. You look at whatever the TDH is calculated, move it over to that line, look down, and verify that gallons per minute is being met. Also during inspection, it's important to verify the elevations. Sometimes people get a little happy with their digging and the tank goes in deeper. And if you're close to that pump curve, you may need to sure that they didn't dig in too deep or the system got moved a little bit or something happened, or the building sewer came out of the other side of the building and now you've got a longer force main. If you're close, check those numbers again, make sure that you're still within that pump curve. So what are some, a little more detail? What are the parts? Distal pressure off of table 4. So this is their discharge rate, depending on what the size of the orifice diameter is. Um, we require at least a 2.5 foot pressure. There may be some that are higher, such as a 5/32. You're going to have to use a 3.5 for a pressure. If you use 1/8 inch, it would be 5 feet of pressure would be the minimum required. So depending on which one, you're going to have a certain distal pressure. Network loss, that's just for fittings, bends, elbows. We just figure an extra 30%. So you just add on and that, take your distal pressure times a 0.3. So if you were using 5 times 0.3, you're going to have an extra 1.5 foot of pressure. Vertical lift, I should go in there. So network loss is just distal times 0.3. Vertical lift is if, like I said, that gravity situation before, if we're only pumping to that outlet, you're only going from the pump to that outlet, and then if it's downhill from there, or if you're pumping up the hill to a mound or pumping up to a high point and then it goes over, it's whatever that high point is. So you have to determine whatever the highest point is. In this case, a mound would be the lateral invert. So that's the highest point you have to lift to. So at distal pressure plus network loss plus the vertical lift, and then the last component here would be your voice main friction loss. So whatever your flow is in gallons per minute that's required, you would look at, and then I don't really have part of the chart here, but then you look at whatever your pipe size is and you'd get a number here, and that's your friction loss per 100 feet of plastic pipe. You can extrapolate between the two if you're in between, or you can just take the higher number to make sure you're in. Hopefully, it's not going to make a difference where you're going to be right on that pump curve, but if you are, um, you can calculate that out. The next question we had pop up, I had a county employee ask, he wanted to do, I think, a soil test for an acquaintance or friend of his, and said, where exactly can or can't I, do a soil test on the side? So SPS 305.33 parent 6, um, lists the requirement as a CST as an employee of a local governmental unit cannot perform soil evaluations in a county that they're employed in or adjacent counties. So the way it's worded is basically if you share a border with that county, you can't work in that county. So if, for instance, if you work in Door County, the only county that you share a border with is Kewaunee. So you cannot work in Door or Kewaunee County. If you're in a county that touches a lot, for instance, let's pick on one, let's say Sauk County, you cannot work in Sauk, Juneau, Vernon, Richland, Iowa, Dane, Columbia counties. So it's whatever county that you share a border with. Whether or not Adams, I'd have to look at the map to see if they share a border. It doesn't looks like they're kitty corner. Um, but it's whatever you share a border with. So you'd have to basically be one county away. So if you're in a Sauk County, you could work in Marquette, even though it's fairly close. You don't share a border. Monroe County, you could work in. You don't share a border. As long as you're not sharing a border, you could hop over to that other county. So just something to be aware of if you are a county employee, what that requirement is that And the reason for that is we don't want a conflict. Hopefully, if you're one county away, you're not encountering the same people that you're inspecting, and that's what it's there for. Is that if you're working in a county and you don't want to be working for a plumber or with a plumber on Saturday, and then on Monday you're inspecting that same plumber, we just want to make sure that there's a separation there so that there's no um, real or perceived conflict of interest, and that's what it's there for. Just want to remind everybody that we do have our early failure database. Make sure if you have systems that have premature failures, like less than 15 years or even less than that, help us out and report those systems into the failure database. Um, so if we do have a problem, we have some people that say, I don't like this product or whatever, or it's junk, or that plumber has all bunch of early failures. So if you're a county inspector and you see these, or if you're a plumber and you're running into a product that you've had issues with, or whether or not you've used it or you're cleaning up somebody else's issues, um, you know, make sure that you report these so that we know. And it's not like we're going to go out there and beat up an individual um, or property or something like that, but we need to see a pattern. So if somebody says, hey, this product we've always had issues with, it's junk, it doesn't work, it only lasts 10 years or 5 years and it's gone, um, we need to have that information. We can't go to a manufacturer and say you need to fix something, or we need to revise or change things until we can figure out that there's a pattern, that there is something happening there. So problems don't get fixed, issues need to be reported in order for us to have a track record, to go to them and say, hey, we've got an issue. We've got a number of systems that are having problems, and we need to figure out why and get it corrected. It's not necessarily to point fingers; it's to fix the situation, and we need to have that information in order to do that. So the information is there at the bottom. Otherwise, if you can't copy that, you can contact any one of your POWTS staff, and we can get that information to you. Want to bring up an education opportunity that we have coming up. We do have a basic soils training class. Many of you have probably already received an email regarding that. But we do have a basic soils training coming up. Actually, we have two of them coming up this fall. So there is a nominal registration fee. It's $45. So we kept it inexpensive here, not trying to break the bank. The reason that we have a registration fee that we have not had in the past is that we're working with the University of Wisconsin extension program. So they're the ones that are doing a lot of the legwork for us, and we plan as the years go by, hopefully having them help us out and do more. Getting some people that are experts in soils or experts in other things to come and talk. So I know you guys love hearing the DSPS staff. At Pouch Chat and other things, but we like to have some outside people come in, and you can get a different, slightly different viewpoint and different spin on things, and learn from some others also. So the $45 registration fee is to help them offset their costs. They're doing the legwork for us, setting up the rooms, any room fees, setting up the backhoes, getting the pits dug, any fees associated with that. But the good part is that now with that registration fee, you are getting lunch paid for each day. So still $45 for 12 hours of training. That's pretty cheap. You're talking about $4 an hour for training. You can't beat that. Plus, you got lunch out of the deal. So if you do get registered ahead of time, that's $45. If you do a late registration, you still can, but it's an extra $10 because that sort of messes with some of the counts for lunch and things like that. Um, so anyway, make sure that you register. You can see our DSPS website. We have it posted on there, but the registration link is actually through the UW extension. So that's the go.wisc.edu/cert soil test 2024. So that's a registration link for that. Again, it's on our website, but we have two different times. We have Antigo, which is at the end of the month, September 25th, 26th. Registration by Friday, September 20th. So you still got, what here, 2 weeks yet? to go basically. Well, 10 days, week and a half. Um, so registration for that one. And the other one is Prairie du Sac. Down in Sauk County, so Antigo, Langlade County, Prairie du Sac, Sauk County. I guess Antigo we're meeting at the fairgrounds, and Prairie du Sac we're actually meeting at a dairy forage building, which is adjacent to Badger Army Ammunition Plant area down there. So you're familiar with that. So that one is the following week, October 1st and 2nd. That deadline's a little later, Thursday, September 26th. So anyway, make sure if you're interested in these, it's basic soils. So we're talking all about soil structure, texture, things like that. We have a day and a half in the classroom, and then we have an afternoon. We're actually going out and taking a look at soils. If you're interested in obtaining your CST license, great class to get you through. If you haven't done a lot of soils or rusty on it, and you want to go back through and brush up on it, another great class for that. If you already have your license, you will get 12 continuing education credits for the CST license. Anyway, just want to put that out there. We got two opportunities coming up. Some other training that we may have coming up is we're looking at doing some other winter stuff, maybe a remote soils this winter, maybe some plan review training this winter, and probably do some more in the field soil training next spring. But just let you know these two opportunities are out there. We've got about 24 people signed up already between the two of those. So this is what our agenda again looks like. Um, you know, different things, soil formation, physical properties, how to do a soil and site evaluation, chemistry, biology, hand texturing. You'll get plenty of opportunities to get your fingers dirty doing some hand samples. So soil physics, classification, and using soil survey. Um, and then we'll be viewing soil out in the field on the second day. If weather's right, if weather isn't good, we may flip flop those. So and yes, we've had people ask that if I can only make one day, yeah, we prefer that you're there for both. But if you can only make one or the other, that's up to you. If you can only make one, you're welcome to do that also. Another question we had come up here, about pipe connections. We've had some issues where some connections are not being made or they're making the wrong ones. Um, so check under SPS 384.40. It defines the types of joints allowed for various materials. So typically, um, you know, like PVC pipe, we're going to have a mechanical. Um, so push on would be, like something like that, or a fern coat type, where you have a mechanical joint allowed. Otherwise, a solvent, which is a primer and solvent glue that's done. But you also have to make sure what kind of use it's going to be for. For instance, fern coats are not approved for pressure distribution. So, I mean, there's some issues like that, you have to take a look at those to see what's that fern co approved for. How is it done? The one I didn't put on here is I guess you could have threaded pipe if you want to use Schedule 80. You could do threaded joints. Um, but so 384.40 defines the types of joints allowed. So make sure that they're being glued. So a situation we've seen is inside the drain field. Um, distribution networks are not being fitted together even in gravity. They still have to be joined according to the type of joint that's allowed. You can't just push them together and hopefully they stay. They have to be actually glued according to the type of joint that's allowed. As part of joints, make sure you know the difference between drain, waste, and vent versus pressure connections. We see this once in a while out in the field, that drain, waste, and vents are for only non-pressurized pipe gravity. A lot of times the part that seals inside the fitting isn't very much. And so it's all right if it's not under pressure. There's enough there contact area for the glue to hold if it's just a drain or a vent. But if it's under pressure, you need more contact. And so pressure fittings are usually a deeper socket. There's more sidewall for contact area for the glue to hold. So make sure as an installer and an inspector that we're using the right fittings there. That we're not using a drain waste vent fitting, that we're using a pressurized fitting for pressurized force mains and distribution networks. So make sure you know the difference on that for your pipe connections. Private interceptor sewers, had some questions show up about that. When exactly do we have to look out for those? Private owned sewer connecting two or more buildings not controlled by a public authority. So, if it's the same building, two of them coming out, that's not defined as a public interceptor sewer. It functions as much, probably should still do the same things, but it's not called a private interceptor. Um, but if it's two or more buildings that are connecting together, then it's a private interceptor. And if you're 4 inches or less, it can be reviewed as part of the POWTS submittal. They don't require a general plumbing review anymore. So it's been that way for a while. But does something need to be recorded on the deed showing a private interceptor? If serving more than two, one or two family dwellings and their accessory structures, then yes. So if it's just like this, a home and a workshop, no, nothing needs to be recorded. But if it's more than two, one or two family dwellings and their accessory structures, then yes. We had one that came through that was like they put a drain in a bunch of storage buildings. Each storage unit was a separate building, and they had all these. They had it plumbed for a bathroom, I guess, or something. And so all these different sewer lines are all connected together. Those are private interceptors that had to be recorded on the deed. Beauty salons, domestic wastewater is defined as sanitary, bath, laundry, kitchen, and washing. Um, So, what's a beauty salon? Well, if they're washing a hair, that's considered domestic wastewater, but a lot of other things at a salon are not. So, chemicals from people doing perms or doing hair dyes or coloring, like this person is. Also, beauty salons do other things such as nails. So, if there's nail polish, polish remover, things like that. Those are not allowed to discharge to a soil-based system. And a lot of times, nationwide, we've seen some things come through where they're having some problems with them. They're actually considered hazardous waste, especially those that are heavy into the nails and things like that, or heavy with the chemicals. So be aware that not all beauty salons are the same. If they're just doing, haircuts and a wash, or it's a barbershop haircut wash, that's okay. If they're doing other things, and again, what they're doing today may not be what they're doing tomorrow, but if they're doing perms, dyes, nails, things like that, you're probably best to direct them into a holding tank and then have that pumped out and dealt with separately. But even at that, have to be careful that some of them may actually be hazardous waste. Um, Treatment plants may not want to accept them. State-owned property. Want to mention that we've been having some issues over the summer construction season. State-owned property. So facilities on state property or state-owned buildings are the jurisdiction of DSPS, not the counties. So everything still applies. Still need a soil test, still need a plan, still need a permit, still need an inspection, but those are all done at the state level. So plan review and permits are done through ESLA. You actually apply for a state sanitary permit through the ESLA program. Inspections and plan reviews are performed by DSPS staff. So if it's in my district, you have to schedule me to come out and do that. So like a lot of us at the as opposed to the county level, we're pulled a bunch of different ways. We have meetings, we have other stuff that we have to do. So if you're working on a state project, coordinate well in advance. All aspects, the soils on site, we may want to come out and look at the soils. So let us know if you're working on a state project. Get involved with us. The project managers don't always know what's required. But if you run into a state project, or state-owned property. We did run into a couple odd ones where the county has a park, but it's on state-owned property, but it's like a 99-year lease or perpetuity lease to the county to operate it. Um, American Legion State Forest is privately owned um, buildings by different Legion posts, but it's on state property. Again, those are state projects. So has to come back to the state. The counties don't have jurisdiction for that. So make sure that you're contacting us. Want to mention coarse fragments quick. I know we're running out of time here. Bedrock is greater than 50% weathered in place, but transported coarse fragments may require additional treatment. So we have to make sure that we're identifying those. So if you're in sandy soils, you got outwash or whatever. Make sure that you have a sieve. That's the best way to determine coarse fragments. Um, and we may need greater separation. If you're over 35% and you're on I don't have the complete one here, but if you're on those coarse sandy soils, you may need greater separation distance. So how do when you've got big ones like this? Well, you can do a couple of different things. There's a tape measure at the top. You can, just put the tape randomly up against the wall and count whatever, use, you whatever percentages you want. But, every inch doesn't intercept a stone or a coarse fragment, and you can count how many times out of 10 inches that you encounter, or how many times out of 30 inches, and you can get a percentage that way. Do it a couple random ways. So there's ways to do it. Other ways that you can do it if you can't sieve out, you can maybe do this: take a picture, come back to the office, draw some circles around where the coarse fragments are, and then put a grid on it, and then do sort of the dot matrix thing and count. So in this box here, there's 364 dots total. 240 dots are on a fragment. That's 60% coarse fragments here, and do a couple different squares. This one is 31% fragments. This one is 44. Average those three together to determine, when a sieve isn't big enough. What are some other ways that I could do that? Want to mention hydrograph update quick. For those of you affected in the hydrograph counties, which would be Adams, Juneau, Wood, Portage, and Waushara counties. DSPS is working with the affected counties. We've been gathering data. We're still working with them in contact. We're also working with Wisconsin Geological Natural History Survey, that's WGNHS, to evaluate some data and get recommendations on how to proceed. So they're going to be looking at some of our well data, some of the hydrology, and determining, where our confidence levels are, what's going on with the groundwater flooding, what's going on with the water elevations. So don't have much more to update you with right now, other than as more information becomes available, we're going to share it with those affected counties and reach out to you guys, let you know what's going on. A couple other things wanted to mention: that Isla now allows you to search by license only without knowing the type. We used to have to type in the number and then have the space dash space and then no. For like master plumber, restricted sewer is now, um, plumber master restricted. They screwed some stuff up. So without having to know the license type or knowing what their license is, you can now search just by that license type, or just by the number, without knowing the license type. So something else to be aware of. Want to mention plan submittals. As the years gone by, when submitting plans for review, be sure to include all supporting documents. Um, plans are getting unnecessarily placed on hold. So the ones we're really running into is two different things. So if you're sending in a plan that had an IDR attached to it, interpretive determination report, the interpretive may have been done 2 months ago. It's without having that PWTS number for that interpretive. Either attach the interpretive as a PDF, or say what the PWTS number for the interpretive is. We've had some come through with no soils, no interpretive, and just say, here's the plan, not knowing the soils and the interpretive were already approved. You have to let the plan reviewer know what that is. Also, if you're doing a revision, you need to include the PWTS number. I think there's a question for the revision in there, but still, tell us on the plan: this is the old PWTS number. This is what I did. I changed whatever. I changed from whatever, easy flow to a pipe and gravel, or whatever the revision happens to be. Let us know, so that we're not spending all day re-reviewing stuff that doesn't need to be reviewed. We can just look at what the changes are. A couple other quick product things in here. Aerofin was just approved a couple days ago for use in Wisconsin. It's, you can look in Isla for product details and get that information. Next month, Infiltrator will actually provide training about Aerofin, so we'll get to learn more about it in detail. But if you want to learn more now, you can look up their approval. It's a product with sand underneath, so it's going to get similar downsizing credits as Geomat and Elgin do. Another product that has an update is White Knight did receive approval for commercial use in Wisconsin. It does not get any downsizing credits for commercial use. It just reduces commercial strength down to residential, but you don't get the downsizing credit for it. So it will be able to be used for commercial, but you're only taking commercial down to residential. Again, check ISLA for any details. Also, I put in here, we had a question, can you use for rejuvenation? Yes, you can still use for rejuvenation without going through additional requirements for that. Have a lot of questions. My name is somewhere's floating around out there for a contact for Wisconsin Fund. It's okay, but I get a lot of questions on this. I think last week I received, I think, 7 calls on Wisconsin Fund. Again, Wisconsin Fund is set to end on June 30th of 2025. We're already in the final grant period, so we're already processing last year's installations. So if systems installed this year want to apply for Wisconsin Fund, they would not get funded until after June 30th, which means there is none. So systems installed this year, we're not going to be accepting any applications because it's not going to be funded. Wisconsin Fund has been revived in the last minute in previous budgets. I wouldn't count on that happening again. If it does, we'll deal with it if it does happen, but don't plan on it being reinstituted. Um, but what are some other things that you can do? One of the things at Farm Tech Days I learned is right next to us, USDA Rural Development, Rural Housing Program, had a table and they shared some information with me. So they have some programs to help people out for low income. Grants available for people age 62 and up. Loans can be at any age. And you can see they can give up to $40,000, 20-year loans, 1% interest. Um, so I mean, programs out there for people. And this is not just for septics, but this would be septics, wells, roof, windows, whatever. So um, any kind of health and safety hazard things that have to be addressed. So anyway, if you know people that might qualify, I'm not going to get into a lot of details. That's up to them to decide whether they qualify or not and apply. But you can go onto the state website for USDA Rural Housing Program or Rural Development, I guess technically what they're called. But they have places throughout the state, and you can get some information from them. And if you have people that might qualify, you can send them that direction. But otherwise, finished up right on time. A little fast at the end, but we got through it. So, anyway, thanks for attending Pouch Chat. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, you know how to get a hold of us through the usual channels if you need to.